Ahoy everyone, it's Jeff, aka Scummer, and welcome back to History with Scummer. Been a couple of days since my last little reaction stream that I did. I'm here to do part 2 of that today. Part 2 of OverSimplified Russian Revolution. So once again, just the usual sort of things. First of all, one, I am not a historian, have had no training as such. The purpose of this channel is to share a little bit of, because I do have an interest, don't get me, of course I do, I wouldn't be doing this. So it's, me to maybe tell a little bit about what I know, but maybe also learn a thing or two as I go as well. And that's what we hope to do in it here, just help us all learn a little bit more together. I don't know if anyone's in the chat at the moment. I don't see anyone as of yet, but I'm about to jump into it. But I will say, if there is anyone in the chat, let me know about the sound quality of the oversimplified video I'm sharing, because it seemed to have a bit of an apparently had a bit of an echo the other day. I didn't pick up on it until after I went off air, but I don't know why that was, because there was no reason for it. But if there's anyone in the chat listening in right now, do let me know how Oversimplified's video sounds with me sharing it in this stream. So without further ado, shall we jump into this?
While Nicholas had been busy playing with his new best friend, tensions in Europe had been rising. It just so happened that in 1914, one Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary went for a drive with the top down in Sarajevo. One thing leads to another, and suddenly Russia found itself at war with half of Europe. A wave of patriotism swept through Russia.
Okay, yes. So now, obviously, where we left it off was we were just getting into the World War One. And obviously Rasputin's there and having a lot of influence in Russia at this time. But so this is where we left off. Okay, it's saying I'm getting a bit of an echo now. I can't understand why that is, honestly. Let me try removing it again. And we'll I'll try it resharing it again, because I don't understand why that's happening. There really shouldn't be a reason for it. Okay, we'll try that again, see what happens.
The capital was renamed Petrograd because St. Petersburg sounded a bit too German. Even revolutionaries were getting on board. To them, World War I was a big stinky imperialist war, but they didn't want their big stinky imperialist replaced by a foreign one. So pretty much everyone wanted Russia to win. I hope Russia loses. Geez, read the room, Lenin. Lenin hoped Russia would lose because that would help him overthrow the Tsar.
This is true. Yeah, the Bolsheviks were very good. I believe at this time Lenin's somewhere in Switzerland. A lot of the Bolshevik leadership's in exile at this time. Okay, it's still echoing. I honestly don't know what I can do about it. Let me check the volume on here. Okay, let me try.
As long as he did that, who cares if Germany blows up half the country? And blow up half the country, they did. And
how's that sound now? I just tried to reduce the volume on YouTube a little. So I don't know how that's sounding now. Otherwise, I really don't know what to do about this echo, honestly, because there's no reason for it to be echoing.
An efficient Tsarist government meant there were shortages of just about everything you need to fight a war. And if losing a teensy-weensy war with Japan upset the people, losing a giant wide war like this was much worse. Soldiers were deserted, the economy was imploding, and in no time, Russia was starving. The peasants were getting more peasantry, the workers were getting more workery, all the while Germany was getting more Germany. Dimitri, we need to win this war. I need someone with a...
Yeah, so this does not go... well for Russia at all. No, sorry, I really don't know what I can do about this echo at the moment. I apologise for this, but it's not. I'll try and, Okay, Spooky, I'll try that. I'll try that. I'll try that. Maybe that's what's causing it. Okay.
Great military mind to step in and take control. You're right. How about General Hickalooper? How about me? You can't run the war. Who'll be in charge of the country while you're gone? Obviously, my German wife and a homeless wizard. Duh.
Okay. Now I don't know if that helped or not. I don't know if that helped or not. Thanks for the suggestion, Spooky. Yes. Okay. So it's not going well for Germany. So Nicholas decides he's going to go. He's going to go. Command troops in the front, and he leaves obviously his wife, his German wife, the Tsarina Alexandra, in charge with Rasputin. Do you see how this is probably not a good look for him right now? And he's again, he just makes mistake after mistake after mistake.
Nicholas declared himself commander-in-chief and went to the front lines, leaving his German wife in charge while they were fighting the Germans. It wasn't a good look. And because Alexandra was so close to Rasputin, people believed that he was actually calling the shots and secretly destroying Russia, and maybe even boinking her. An even worser look. At this point, a bunch of nobles just couldn't take it anymore. Rasputin is destroying the country. We have to break his magic spell over the Tsar. But how? He's magic. Dude. Very cool. Hey, it's Rasputin. The sexy party is running.
Yes, this is kind of how they lured. They lured Rasputin in here. Say cheers to Spooky in the chat there. Yes, this is how they lured Rasputin into this, was by inviting him into a party. So, but of course, we're going to see what happens next, because the death of Rasputin, there's a lot of stories about this. It's sometimes difficult to know how much is true and what isn't, but it was, let's just say, he was pretty difficult to kill off as Rasputin.
Running a little late, but in the meantime, why don't you try one of these totally not poisoned cakes? Dude, why'd you say it like that? He's totally gonna know they're poisoned now. Shut up. I said they're not poisoned. Dude, he just ate so much poison. How is he still alive? It must be the magic. Go with plan B. Is he dead? See, Boris? I told you he was the Antichrist and you didn't believe me. Can you shut up for 1 minute and help me roll him up? Are you?
Yeah, so there's definitely belief that he actually drowned. They say poisoned him. That didn't work. Shot him, and rolled him up to the carpet and threw him in the river. Yeah, it's yeah, like I said, he wasn't easy to get rid of, was old Rasputin. Now I've got to say, this isn't Rasputin's not an area of this bit I know too much about, so it's something I'm gonna have to sort of look up on a bit more. But
Sure he's dead? I don't know, but I'm supposed to be hosting a charity auction right now. Can we get this over with? Okay, now he's dead. The murder of Rasputin, just like his life, is shrouded in mystery and speculation. He probably didn't really die like that, but he also probably didn't really heal people. He probably didn't influence the Tsar as much as people thought. He probably wasn't secretly destroying the country. But what he definitely did do, even in his death, was ruin the Tsar's reputation. Russia's autocracy looked more outdated than ever, and the Russian people were taking notice. Come on, men, remember what we're fighting for. Yeah, no, we're out. World War I left Russia broke, hungry.
and this is some of the problem. You know, this war's not going well. It's not going. The economy is absolutely tanking, and yeah, there's mass desertions. And eventually there'll be even like strikes on the front line. Soldiers will go on strike. So.
And exhausted. And with Nicholas acting as commander-in-chief, he was getting even more blame. For the second time, Russia was on the brink of revolution. By 1917, Russia had been fighting a war it couldn't afford for 3 years. They were running out of many things, most worryingly, food. On International Women's Day, 1917, thousands of hungry women in Petrograd were so sick of being hungry that they took to the streets. And it turns out it's not just women who experience hunger, but men too. So the next day they joined in as well. Gatherings on the streets were forbidden, but I'm not sure how you'd arrest 250,000 people. The crowds.
Yeah, so events just kind of overtook here. It was, yes, International Women's Day, and it essentially was a group of women who went out that sort of started this whole thing in motion. Now, when we talk about the Russian Revolution, and obviously most people know this, we're talking about actually two revolutions this year. What's called the February Revolution and the October Revolution, which is the October, which is, I believe, technically November because they were still using the old calendar in Russia. But so this is what we call the February Revolution. This is the one that's going to force the Tsar to abdicate. So
demanded an end to the war, an end to food rationing, and even an end to the Tsar's autocracy. Now, normally the troops would deal with this kind of thing, but as it turns out, soldiers get hungry too, and they were also tired of having to kill their fellow Russians so much. So entire regiments mutinied in the capital, and they joined the crowd as well, trashing symbols of the Tsar and his autocratic regime. Things were
yeah, and famously, even the Cossacks went over to the revolution, or at least some of them did. So
escalating very quickly. Liberal politicians watching the riots in the streets had long been dissatisfied with the Tsar, since he would shut their parliament down anytime they did something he didn't like. They believed the only way to bring stability back to the streets was for Nicholas II to abdicate. The riots continued. The police fired on soldiers. Soldiers fired on soldiers. The workers re-established the Petrograd Soviet. Politicians began arresting the Tsar's ministers. He may have been an autocrat.
couple of things there. First of all, interesting what he said about the Tsar shutting down Parliament. You can see this with other sort of revolutionary things in history. Very same thing Charles I did in England. Anytime he disband Parliament every time they wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. And we talked a bit about the Soviets in the first one, right? The workers' councils, and as I said, the Bolsheviks themselves. They in 1905 they were a little bit more suspicious of the Soviets, but they had embraced them by 1917. And I believe if it is some point in 1917 that Trotsky actually joins the Bolsheviks, because he actually said he'd been a part of something. He actually sided with the Mensheviks originally in the split, and then he was part of some other small group. I think I might be butchering the pronunciation. It's something like Mesoyonsi or something. I might be butchering the pronunciation of this. So
But he just lost complete control of his capital city. Talk about embarrassing. Nicholas, the troops have turned against us. The people have taken over the city. They've even cut my phone line. Hello? Hello? The phones are down. Things must be bad. I'd better go back there. Nicholas hopped on the next train back to Petrograd, but he never made it to the city. His train was met by military generals and other politicians. What's going on? Nicholas, look, man, we need to talk. It's not you, it's us. Who am I kidding? No, it's definitely you. During the whole crisis in Petrograd, the liberals convinced the generals that if Nicholas abdicated, the people would calm down, and the generals were on board. They didn't have time to quell the chaos, because don't forget, they were still losing a global, all-encompassing war against the Germans. And with the military...
yeah, now what initially is going to happen here is Nicholas is going to try and abdicate in favour of one of his relatives, but that people they're not wearing that. But this, the Russians, they're still involved in the war here, and it's not going well for them. So yeah, it's just a mess at the moment. So obviously this is where the Tsar is going to be sort of forced out.
No longer on his side, Nicholas had no choice but to step down. Throughout his entire reign, he had done everything he could to keep all the power for himself, and in the end, that's exactly what left him with none. But then there was a big question. Who would replace Nicholas? Well, his son Alexei was next in line. Hey buddy, Daddy couldn't handle the complex socioeconomic problems of a giant multinational, multi-ethnic empire that's engaged in total war with all of Europe. You think you could give it a shot? Alexei just wasn't ready to be Tsar. Nicholas...
I'm sorry, that's I couldn't help but laugh at that. But obviously, as I said, yes, the Crown Prince Alexei, obviously he had haemophilia. This is why Rasputin was brought in, and it was kind of touched on by Oversimplified in part 1. That here's the thing: if Rasputin had any success with healing Alexei at all, it was probably because he took him off things like the aspirins, which for someone with haemophilia, a blood condition like that, probably giving him stuff that's going to be a blood thinner. That's probably why Rasputin had some success. So
did have a brother, but given the state of the empire, he wasn't keen either. And so, 300 years of Romanov rule in Russia just kind of came to an end. The earlier 1905 revolution hadn't changed much, but this new revolution had left Russia without a czar. And still, before the year was over, there would be one more revolution left to come. Nicholas's failure as commander of the armed forces was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Do you think maybe you could have done any better? Well, guess what? It's time to find out in Rise of Kingdoms. Rise of Kingdoms is
again, I'll say this: I'll leave the ads in. Always give Oversimplified their due here. They, as far as like little jokes and segues into their sponsorships, they're really quite good with it. I'll let it play.
an epic, massive multiplayer, free-to-play, real-time strategy game. Choose from 11 historical civilizations, including Rome, China, or France. You can form alliances with other players, or conquer the crap out of them in real-time strategic battles. Oh look, it's Master Tactician and Handsome General Alexander the Great. If you want my advice, the troop is the most important chess piece in a battle. In Rise of Kingdoms, each troop can be controlled. To win a battle, you need to utilize careful positioning through unique troop formations, while using terrain to your advantage. I literally won the Battle of Gaugamela with fewer troops by using superior strategy. You're wrong. Joan of Arc? That's right, noob. Listen up. I'm about to drop some knowledge. The commander's skill is way more important. Each Rise of Kingdoms commander has their own unique skill. Look at me. I've added attack and defense buffs to my troops. Whoa. I'm also able to cure my wounded soldiers. Cool. And I can increase their wood gathering speed by 10%. Not as cool, but okay. In Rise of Kingdoms, the decision is yours. Now go ahead, choose your favorite real historical figure and lead your troops into real-time battle. Download Rise of Kingdoms now for free by clicking on the link in the description below. Join me and 50 million other online players and guide your civilization from a lowly clan into a great empire. Now where was I? Oh yeah, Hungry Woman, Absolute Chaos, and the end of the Tsar. Oh, hey guys, says here there's been a revolution, and the reign of the Tsars has ended. Oh, come on, I missed another one? Why am I even in this video? Well, it's not like you could have done anything, as long as there's a world...
Okay, yes, so that's right. Lenin, I let those ads play because I got to give Oversimplified due that they do some excellent transitions into their sponsors, whoever is sponsoring them. This is true. Lenin was in Switzerland at the time in exile. It's interestingly when he was sort of very much caught off guard by the February Revolution. And I mean, he'd even sort of said not long before this that he didn't think he'd see another revolution in Russia in his lifetime, and he only said this like weeks beforehand. And he was actually working on which is probably his best known sort of work as far as Marxist sort of literature goes, a book called State and Revolution. And he actually sort of I'm trying to find, this is the quote, this is a postscript to his first edition, and he said about the experience, but he says it's more, he sort of ends it by saying it's more pleasant and useful to go through the experience of a revolution rather than write about it. So yeah, essentially, he's essentially, yeah, it's better to actually take part in a revolution than sit here writing a book about it. Which I suppose for a revolutionary, yes, that's probably the attitude he should have had. But we'll get. I'll just pause that. I don't know if they're going to mention this, but obviously, here's another problem Lenin's going to have, and the Bolsheviks going to have. He's going to have to sort of travel to Russia if he's in Switzerland. Now he's got a slight problem. He's got to go through Germany amongst the other countries he's got now, and he's got to get so this obviously if he travels through Germany and is allowed to travel through Germany, there's people could accuse him of being a traitor. Now, here's the thing. The big thing that the Bolsheviks put out there as a bit of thing against this is that he got into like a sealed coach, like a sealed train, which was a diplomatic kind of thing that would just go through, and that's how he got through. But it wasn't truly a sealed train. They did. I mean, it's documented. The passengers got off this thing and in Germany and spent the night in Frankfurt, and so it's a big point of contention actually, because you tell you now, like Marxist Leninists today will argue the point about the sealed train and so on, but it wasn't a true sealed train, no.
World War, you can't get back to Russia. Who wants to start a revolution? Revolution. Dang it! Despite getting rid of Nick, Russia was still at war with half of Europe. The Germans, however, had an idea. They thought that if they helped.
And this is why there's the argument about it, because this is the whole thing. Why there's the argument, and the whole myth of the sealed train thing is the German. Bear in mind, Russia is still at war with Germany here, even though there's the revolution. Russia's still in the war. They definitely could see Lenin as someone quite useful to them, because Lenin wants Russia out of the. The Bolsheviks want out of the war. So Germans are probably thinking, yeah, let's maybe sort of help this guy get back in or something. And this is why this is why Bolsheviks laboured this point about like the sealed train and so on, even though we know it wasn't truly a sealed, because they didn't want to be accused of collaborating with the Germans.
Lenin get back, he would cause trouble for the new Russian government. So they put him on a train, destination, Petrograd. It was a long journey, and while Lenin was cooped up in his train, things in Russia were changing. Workers were taking control of their factories. Soldiers were socking it to their mean old officers. Without a czar, a big old power vacuum had opened up, and someone needed to fill it. The liberals proposed they be in charge, and they set up the provisional government. The workers, however, had already begun establishing local Soviets, largely controlled by the social revolutionaries and the Mensheviks. And since neither felt like they had the power to oust the other, Russia ended up in a classic.
Yeah, so it's this. So you've got this sort of thing of like dual power kind of going on within Russia at the moment, and the Bolsheviks are pretty much, they're not at this time quite the force they're going to be. I mean, they're there, but the Soviets are set up, and it is mainly social revolutionaries and the Mensheviks that probably do tend to hold a lot more. So you've got this provision, you've got this sort of almost dual power, and these two things that can't necessarily exist with one another in a sense. The Russian Duma and the workers' Soviets, and they couldn't really. Obviously, they're not going to be able to function together.
Dual power conundrum. The two coexisted, with the provisional government becoming the official government and the elected Soviets issuing orders to the workers and soldiers. This power balance was delicate, and all it would take is one bold revolutionary to come along and give everyone a big-brained.
That's what I mean. It was like I said, they couldn't coexist. They could coexist, but not for long. And this is why. I said very delicate balance. Only need something to change within like the Soviets or something, and obviously, here comes Lenin and some of the other Bolshevik leaders back into the equation.
Beat down. Oh boy, Lenin's coming home. I can't wait for him to see all the great things we've accomplished. And I'm going to show him my fan art. Oh, look, here he comes now. Shut up, shut up! You all suck! The provisional government sucks, the Soviet sucks, even your fan art sucks! Why does he have to be so mean? In case you couldn't tell, Lenin wasn't a fan of everything that had been...
I'll say this, Lenin wasn't necessarily the greatest speaker out of the Bolshevik, the sort of main revolutionaries. I mean, the guy who was the good charismatic speaker would have been Leon Trotsky. So, yeah, there's little truth in that.
Happening. In his April theses, he called the provisional government and the Soviets a bunch of big bourgeois bozos. And he kind of had a point. There was still a lot for the Russian people to be mad about. The provisional government hadn't got Russia out of the war, the people were still hungry, and the peasants were still hoping to get more land. Meanwhile, the Soviets hadn't done much to change things either. But even though they weren't perfect, a lot of people did like what the new government had been doing. There was progress. The secret police were disbanded, the death penalty abolished. They even planned to hold elections, meaning for the first time ever, the Russian people could choose their own government. To many, Lenin seemed like some out-of-touch weirdo. If Lenin wanted to go from whiny irrelevant zero to a hunky communist hero, he'd need to shake things up a bit. So he and the Bolsheviks came up with a hot new slogan that promised to give the people what the provisional government wouldn't. Peace. Don't like war? We'll end it. Land. You want land? We'll give it to you. Bread. Hungry? Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Lenin also called for all power to the Soviets.
Yeah, and that's all it was. Simple slogan: peace, bread, land, all power to the worker Soviets. It's very, very simple but effective slogan. And obviously, there was a bit more to it than that. I mean, the Bolsheviks did start getting in there and agitating, and so on. And there's going to be an incident where I don't know if maybe OverSimplified will cover it. There's going to be an incident that's going to come up where some guy from the military is going to try and overthrow the provisional government led by Kerensky, and the Bolsheviks are they're going to they will sort of actually fight on the side of Kerensky, but to actually paraphrase something Lenin said, it's himself in a completely different work of his. They were supporting him the same way a rope is supporting a man to be about to be hanged.
Which meant getting rid of the provisional government and having the Soviets run the place. A communist dream. The people liked these slogans, and bit by bit, the Bolsheviks became more popular. Some Mensheviks even began switching sides. But even though the people thought Lenin's slogans rocked, as long as the provisional government didn't mess up, they'd continue to support it. So let's check in on the provisional government. Oh, provisional government, you've made a big mess. The provisional government lasted for just 9 months, but those 9 months were chaos. The people wanted Russia out of World War I, but Minister of War Alexander Kerensky thought instead of doing that, why not do the exact opposite? If the people saw more Russian victories, they'd have to support the new government. And that went just about as well as you might expect. These heavy defeats worsened the Russian economy and made the hungry people hungrier. And by now, I think you know what comes next. They trashed the place. More looting, more rioting, more violence. It was like the Tsar had never abdicated. Tens of thousands of armed workers took to the streets during some of the worst violence Petrograd had seen yet. And in response, Kerensky called in the troops, who opened fire on the demonstrators. For now, Lenin and other Bolshevik leaders wanted to distance themselves from the violence, but the crowds marched under Bolshevik slogans, and as a result, Kerensky, now the prime minister, took the opportunity to stamp down on the Bolsheviks. Their leaders were arrested. Lenin was accused of being a German agent, and he was forced to flee to Finland in disguise.
Yeah, again, back to what I was saying earlier about this problem they had with Lenin being accused of being a German agent. So yes, he did briefly go to Finland, but as you can see here, the provisional government is looking like a lame duck. You're starting to see why the Bolsheviks are gaining support now particularly amongst the urban working class. In particular, that is where the Bolsheviks. I mentioned the other day about like the citadel of Bolshevism being like the Patilov works in Petrograd, which was probably the largest factory in the world at that point. So.
Guys, this sucks. Now I'll never get to have my revolution. Why are you wearing a dress? It's a disguise, idiot. And it makes me feel pretty. Kerensky had successfully dealt with the violence, but he just couldn't catch a break. This increasing support for more extreme forms of socialism, along with the poor handling of the war, alarmed traditional liberals and bougie business boys. To appease them, Kerensky decided to promote a military legend to Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, someone who hated the revolution, loved the death penalty, and was devoutly anti-socialist, General Kornilov. Hey man, thanks for the promotion. That was real swell of you. Of course, with you by my side, who would dare try to overthrow me? How about me? I did not see this coming. Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you put someone who's obviously, very much a Tsarist loyalist and going to be counter-revolutionary, and you put him in charge of the army. The armed forces? What do you think he's going to do? What do you think his guy is likely to do? He's going to try and put the genie back in the bottle here. So now, obviously, this is going to be a thing where Kerensky is actually going to have to make a bit of a deal with the Bolsheviks to help stop Kornilov. Because the Bolsheviks are going to organise agitation and strikes and opposition to this attempted coup.
Fortunately for Kerensky, Kornilov hated the liberal and socialist reforms of the new government, particularly the dumb socialist soldiers' committees. The army was no place for undisciplined left-wing snowflakes. Fearing a Bolshevik takeover was imminent, Kornilov ordered his men towards Petrograd to oust the Soviet and take over. Kerensky freaked out, and he needed help. Since he knew Trotsky was finger-licking good at organizing, he and other Bolshevik leaders were released, and they, along with the Soviet, organized the defense of Petrograd. Kornilov had the power of soldiers, but the Soviet had the power of workers. And they did what workers do best. Railroad workers diverted Kornilov's men away. Telegraph workers messed with his communications. They even infiltrated his forces and encouraged the demoralized men to desert. They were also armed en masse, but in the end, no fighting was necessary because Kornilov's coup just fell apart, and Kornilov was sent straight to prison. Everything was coming up Kerensky. Hey, thanks for the help, boys. Couldn't have done it without you. Now that there's no longer any threat, how about you, return all those guns I gave you? No. Oh, no.
Yeah, so here's the thing: you got rid of one problem. You've just armed another. Now so you've got Bolsheviks who you now know. If you're Kerensky at this point, you're in big trouble now because you've only got rid of Kornilov, but you've done this deal with the Bolsheviks, and we know that they can agitate and so on, and what they did there to stop Kornilov, that they can agitate against you in the same way using workers, but now you've also armed them. So, yeah, you can see where this is going.
To kill a rat, Kerensky had just given a gun to a bear, a Bolshevik bear. The whole affair was a huge propaganda win for them. They had defended the revolution, and their popularity skyrocketed. They found themselves elected to the Petrograd and Moscow Soviets, with Trotsky even becoming chairman in Petrograd. They were now in a very powerful position, almost powerful enough for Lenin to return home from Finland and finally stage his long-awaited communist revolution. The Bolsheviks began planning their takeover of the Russian government. Some got cold feet and began arguing against Lenin's armed revolution in favor of a more peaceful approach, and they even wrote newspaper articles about it, which kind of gave the whole scheme away. The Bolsheviks are planning an armed revolution? I did not see this coming. Kerensky.
Yeah, there's quite an argument within the Central Committee of the Bolsheviks, the leadership body, over whether the stage what's known as the October Revolution, or whether to take a different approach. And even a little later, when they do commit on this, there's arguments over, do they start this thing in Moscow or in Petrograd? And obviously, Petrograd's going to be the place. So
He began arresting Bolsheviks, and as a result, Lenin and the boys felt they had no choice but to commence the revolution right now. Lenin was back in Petrograd, but was still in hiding, so Trotsky got the ball rolling, using his position as Soviet chairman to organize the Bolshevik militias. Now, if you were to ask Soviet artists, the revolution went something like this. As much as they would like you to think it was a...
Right. Just a little thing on that, that little tune you just heard. Obviously, that's known as the sort of Soviet anthem, the Russian national anthem. That wouldn't have been sung. That wasn't even written till like late 30s or something. It didn't become the national anthem until the 1940s. The big sort of like song that the Bolsheviks and other revolutionaries would have been singing was the Socialist Internationale. That was been the big thing that was. If anyone's seen the film Warren Beatty film Reds, where he plays John Reed, and I'm so up here somewhere. I've got John Reed's book 10 Days That Shook the World, which is like he was a journalist who was in Petrograd in Russia during the October Revolution and was writing about it. But he was obviously, his sympathies were very, very pro-Bolshevik. So, but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic read, though.
Glorious, violent, heroic takeover, the truth seems to be a little more underwhelming. The Bolsheviks just kind of walked into key buildings in the city and took control. Bolshevik supporting sailors even brought in a huge battleship, but there wasn't really any fighting. Nobody really tried to stop them. In just one day, they took control of the city. Next, Kerensky just managed to escape before the Bolsheviks surrounded the Winter Palace, placing the provisional government under siege inside. Is it safe to come out yet? I think so. Fear my revolutionary might! Give me that. That night, Lenin came out of hiding to play a bigger role in the revolution. With him back at the helm, they had one more job to do: storm the Winter Palace and arrest the provisional government. And here comes the final showdown. The palace was defended by a force known as the Battalion of Death, who immediately gave up. And just like that, Lenin had won. As far as violent...
Yeah, and this is true. This is true. This in a lot of sort of mythology of the Russian Revolution, you see the storming of the Winter Palace. You see this thing with the these revolutionaries out there with the guns, the pitchforks, whatever, smashing down the gates and storming into the buildings. It was actually it was relatively peaceful. They just kind of walked, like I said, they just kind of walked in and took over everything, and like. Any forces lord of the provisional government just more or less surrendered straight away, just let them get on with it. It just, I mean, there's the famous Eisenstein film, October. I mentioned one of his other films, and the other one, but October sort of shows the Russian, the storming of the Winter Palace, and it's often said that more people died during the making of Eisenstein's film than in the actual events itself. So. Yeah, it's all a bit the sort of popular image we have of the October Revolution and then taking over it's a bit it's actually far less dramatic.
Bloody revolutionary uprisings go, this wasn't really one of them. But Lenin was finally in charge of Russia. He had spent his whole life dreaming of this moment. He set up the first Council of People's Commissars, his own cabinet with him in charge. This was it. His chance to finally make his communist utopia with equality and freedoms beyond compare. Hey Lenin, before we took power, they were planning on holding elections. Shall we go ahead with those? Of course. You can't have a communist utopia without high levels of political participation. The proletariat should be free to elect who it. What? The social revolutionaries won. We lost.
Okay, so this is the Constituent Assembly elections here, and this is like I said, I don't want to get I hate getting too political on these things because I know I'm going to annoy someone one way or the other. But yeah, now I mentioned now with the provisional government, provisional governments, and the Constituent Assembly, this thing's like a standard parliament. Yes, now the Bolsheviks only won the second most seats in that. The most seats were won by the Social Revolutionaries, even though they still didn't. win an outright majority. I mean, Mensheviks did absolutely really badly in this, but you also had a lot of and things like the cadets, they didn't do too well. But you also had other people standing in this who were like independence movements. You had like the Ukrainian social revolutionaries, the Cossacks, various sort of like independence groups that were there as well. Should say one of the things of the social revolution. Now, as I mentioned before, social revolutionaries, they attracted a lot more support from like the masses Russian peasantry. So they're going to have, that's probably going to reflect, in a way, you could say this probably reflects a bit of what's going on here. Because the working class, although powerful, is still the working industrial workers that support the Bolsheviks. They're still a tiny minority of the country. However, where it gets a little tricky and a little sketchy, and into a lot of the arguments for and against why they disbanded the Constituent Assembly, is that there was definitely divides amongst the social revolutionaries into left and right factions, and you had a left faction that quite often aligned with the Bolsheviks, and so that's where it gets a little sketchy and probably beyond the scope of this little reaction to try and go through all that, because it takes hours to get into, and lots of arguments. But yes, you can essentially put it down to, in a sense, though, that probably there's a good element here of Lenin wasn't happy that the Constituent Assembly that the Bolsheviks didn't win outright, and only came second.
Those don't count. Lenin claimed the elections were unfair, and the Constituent Assembly they created was counter-revolutionary. He presented the new assembly with a motion that basically said, sign here and give up your power. And when the assembly was like, no, Lenin said, see, they're disobeying me. Proof they're counter-revolutionary. Shut it down, boys. Moderate socialists and others weren't happy when Lenin had the assembly closed by force, and when campaigners began taking to the streets, they were fired upon. For Lenin, setting up a communist utopia was looking suspiciously like setting up a dictatorship. While he was implementing many of the communist policies you'd expect, he was also refusing to work with other political parties and cracking down on opposition. Hey Lenin, are you setting up a dictatorship? I'll shoot you if you are. Of course not. What a crazy theory. Anyway, I'm pleased to announce I'm setting up a secret police force to repress and kill traitors. And by traitors, I of course mean anyone not loyal to me. Owie, 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 owie. The assassination attempt made on Lenin's life in August 1918 failed, but in
Yes, there's a lot going on here. Yes, there's this assassination attempt on Lenin, and yeah, the Bolsheviks now are becoming a bit very authoritarian. But what else is going on here at the same time is you've got like a civil war is starting to, is developing now with what's known between the whites and the reds, and the white Russians that are still loyal to the Tsar, and obviously the Bolsheviks. There's a lot of echoes. I'll have to do a reaction to one of the oversimplified one on the French Revolution. There's a lot of similarities that go on with both. That you have opposition at home. You also, and this is one thing that doesn't often get mentioned about the Russian Civil War, there were a lot of other belligerents coming in on the side of the Tsarists. A lot of countries got involved with it. Famously, Britain and the United States spent a small expeditionary force to Archangel, and they actually got kicked out of there by the Red Army eventually. It was actually a bit of a disaster. But there's a lot of similarities, and you kind of think, sometimes I do wonder if these sort of like extreme measures by the government or whatever. There's two ways you can look at it. You can look at like these extreme measures as a reaction to those circumstances, or you can also look at it as that's also giving those sort of circumstances giving authoritarian groups more, ability, more excuses to actually take away liberties and so on. So it's a bit of again, it's a difficult one to get into. There's definitely parallels with the French Revolution going on here, though.
In response, the Bolsheviks ramped up their oppression. But while all of this chaos was erupting back home, Lenin and the boys were also distracted by another problem. They were still at war with the Germans, and they had promised to give the people peace. So Lenin made Trotsky Commissar for Foreign Affairs and sent him off to negotiate a peace deal with the Germans. The Germans offered Trotsky really harsh terms, because they were winning the war. They demanded Russia give up a butt-ton of land, something that would be devastating to the economy. Look, I know it's not great, but I think we have to accept it. Are you insane? This will ruin us. Hey Trotsky, you got a big brain. What do you think? How about no war, no peace? What's that, Mr. Trotsky, sir? It's simple. No war means we'll stop fighting the Germans, but no peace means we won't sign the peace treaty either. Then, when the Germans see we've just stopped fighting, they'll have to leave us alone or something. Trotsky, that's genius. I could kiss you. Do you want me to kiss you? Stop asking me that. Trotsky's no war, no peace plan was a huge success. Oh, wait, no, just kidding. It went exactly as you'd imagine. When the Germans saw the Russians had stopped fighting, they slammed 700,000 troops deep into Russian territory with no resistance. Now, the new peace treaty offered by the Germans was way worse, with Russia losing a huge amount.
Yeah, bad idea, bad idea. So eventually they're gonna. I mean, essentially, bear in mind a lot of this is that they have promised peace. They know the Bolshevik government's in a real bad position here because you've got the German army coming deep into Russia, and you've got this chaos and civil war that's about to start on the other side here. They're in a very difficult position here, and are going to have to make huge concessions.
Of territory, population, and resources. The Bolsheviks had no choice but to accept, and Russia was humiliated. With Petrograd now in an exposed position, Lenin moved the capital to Moscow, just in case. Things really weren't going well for Lenin, and many people were extremely unhappy with the Bolshevik government and its actions. Lenin, you've pissed off so many people that they've united against you. We're under attack. Relax, we always expected some counter-revolutionary pushback. I think we can handle a few angry monopoly men. But Lenin, it's not just the monopoly men. Okay, who are we up against? Well, the liberals, the social revolutionaries, national separatists in Poland, Finland, and the Ukraine, independent warlords setting up chiefdoms, anarchist rebels, the Green Peasant Armies, the Cossacks, the Caucasian states, the Baltic states, the British, the French, the Americans, and the Japanese. Oh, and a legion of Czechoslovakian soldiers seem to have taken over the Trans-Siberian Railway and stolen all the imperial gold reserves. What? How could this get any worse? Oh, and it says here your mother-in-law is coming to stay. No! A variety of anti-Bolshevik forces had united together to topple Lenin's government.
Yeah, like I said, I'm glad they pointed it out because it's often like this what is about to become the Civil War. It's often not mentioned just how many belligerents and people were coming in, against the Bolshevik government. And you look at this map here. Yeah, I mean, essentially, Bolsheviks sort of the Red Army, the red area there is pretty damn small. So they were up against it right now.
Government, and Russia descended into a full-blown civil war. Now, the Russian Civil War was extremely intricate and would really need its own video, but essentially, the anti-Bolshevik white movement gained control of vast, underdeveloped areas, while the Bolshevik Reds controlled the industrial heartland. Using this to their advantage, along with the surprising military genius of Trotsky and the shocking disorganization of the White Army, the fortified Red Army gradually came out.
And this is true. They did. Leon Trotsky was essentially put in charge of organizing the Red Army, and he did a remarkable job for a guy that had absolutely no military experience whatsoever. He did a quite remarkable job of actually organizing the Red Army into an efficient force. And that whole little thing about the train there, very true. That he actually had his own train where he'd go out to the front and he was a very effective military leader as well. On the fact that he would go out and like I said, he had a very good gift for speaking. He could definitely inspire troops and so on to fight for him, and that so yeah, quite an incredible player in this train of events is Trotsky in a way here.
out on top. It was an absolutely brutal conflict, with both sides committing horrendous atrocities. To maintain order at home, the Bolsheviks began the Red Terror, and the secret police would execute tens of thousands of suspected traitors. No one was safe from the violence, not even Nicholas himself. You've probably been wondering what Nicholas has been up to this whole time. Well, after his abdication, he and his family were placed under house arrest. At first, they were allowed to live in their usual luxury, but after Lenin took over, their conditions worsened. The Bolsheviks were just holding on to Nick until they could work out what to do with him, but the Civil War complicated things. The last thing they wanted was for Nick to be freed by the White Army.
Okay, so I think everyone kind of knows what's coming here with the Russian royal family, and you see the problem that he's put both of them this close to Yekaterinburg. So they want them out. They want them out of the way of places like Petrograd and Moscow. But it's also they got him in a spot here where he's suspiciously close to this is the royal family, very suspiciously close to the front lines here of the Civil War. Could have been very, very easily that the Whites could have gotten hold of him and freed him. And it's interesting because a number of things here. It was a bit of a problem what to do with Nicholas. Now he actually did appeal to the King of England, King George V. For asylum, and he was told no. Now, for many years, the official version was that it was Prime Minister David Lloyd George that had sort of said no. Come out to find out later, it was kind of King George V who did not want the Tsar and his family, even though the Tsar was his own cousin. He didn't want him here because this is kind of like they was like this is like this hated figure now or whatever. And Russia wasn't the only place with upheaval and revolutions going on. By 1918, Germany is pretty much in full open. I mean, Italy will go into something called the Two Red Years. 1919, even Britain sort of comes close to it. It's not really. They don't have a thing with Britain is they didn't really have like anything like the Bolsheviks or anyone like that agitating. They had trade union leaders who were not revolutionaries. So that's probably why Britain is, but but you can imagine the few like ruling family monarchies in Europe. And monarchies have fallen left, right, and centre at the time. The Austro-Hungarian Empire has fallen, and the Kaisers had to abdicate in Germany. So you got some places like Britain or whatever, the few sort of remaining strong monarchies. Do you think they really want this unpopular guy Nicholas II's there right now? No. So there is this problem, and the Bolsheviks got this problem as well, what to do with the Russian royal family. And I think we know what's about to happen, but let's let the
thing. And so, to stop this from happening, Nicholas's Bolshevik guards decided to act. It's not entirely certain whether Lenin ordered it, or if the guards were acting on their own volition. But on July 17th, 1918, with White armies approaching, they woke Nicholas and his family in the middle of the night and brought them into the basement. There, a drunken squad of Bolsheviks murdered the entire family. Nicholas, the last Tsar, once one of the most powerful men alive, had met a brutal end. But after years...
Yeah, and the way they set them up for this is that they actually sort of lured the royal family down into the basement, I think under the guise of getting them to take a family photo together, and then there was something, some judgment sort of thing about them being executed for crimes against the people or something, and then they were all shot. Look, and as I said, we do not know. We do not know whether Lenin actually knew about this or ordered it or whatever. I tend to think that someone on the Bolshevik Central Committee had to know. I find it difficult to believe that the Bolshevik leadership didn't know, but we don't really know the answer to that. And interestingly enough, when after they shot some of, I do believe that now this is I've got to, I should probably confirm this or something before. Maybe I'll probably go do a bit of research afterwards just to confirm if what I've said is true or not. But there's a story that because when the Russian royal family sort of were getting away, they actually snuck a lot of their like treasures, like the jewels, out with them, and some of them were sewn into their clothes, and apparently they were wearing some of these clothes that still had these expensive jewels hidden inside of them when they were shot. So yeah, and then of course you get all this thing like they find the remains of the Lord of Romanovs later, but you had these number of frauds. I mean, most notably, you had that woman who was claiming to be Grand Duchess Anastasia that going around for years, and a lot of people even took up her case, and it was like sort of fairy tales kind of films about Anastasia. Of course, not true. Everyone who sort of believed in that their bubble burst when they actually found the remains of Grand Duchess Anastasia. And DNA came along, obviously proved Anna Anderson was not a Romanov. So anyway, let's get back to the
Years of fighting and millions of deaths, Trotsky and his Red Army came out victorious. Wow, that was a close one. Okay, back to creating a communist utopia. How are we doing on that? Well, the Civil War helped create a massive famine and about 5 million people starved to death. There's massive inflation and the ruble is worthless. Hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of railway track have been destroyed. Disease and epidemics have killed 3 million. The population of Moscow and Petrograd has collapsed. Life expectancy has plummeted. Sailors in Kronstadt are rebelling. People are freezing to death in their own apartments and life has been reduced.
I'll say this just on one thing he's said there, okay? Sailors in Kronstadt. I'm not going to get too heavily into this, but I'll just say something. If you're in a room and there's like communists on one side, anarchists on in the same room together, and you want to see some fireworks, just I'll say to both sides, could you discuss Kronstadt with me? And then just sit back and watch the fireworks. That's all I'm going to say on it.
To a constant search for food and shelter. Whoa. Well, this just means I'll have to work twice as hard, day and night, to save the country. Nothing will stop me, short of a couple of sudden strokes. Get the doctor. One thing you have to keep in mind is that everything I've been talking about, the Civil War, the assassination attempt, and Lenin's struggle to maintain control at home, were all happening around the same time, and it must have been extremely stressful. Lenin began getting headaches, insomnia, and in 1922, he suffered 2 separate strokes. As the Soviet Union was officially declared under a strict one-party system, Lenin's health continued to decline, and his ability to lead.
Yeah. Now, so you get this problem here. Now, Lenin is obviously he's not able to. He won't be able to sort of take much of a participation. He's still sort of now. He's still. I think they moved into some like dacha outside of Moscow or something. This is where Stalin's really going to come into the equation here, because he's the party secretary, and he's essentially with he essentially is in charge of like dishing out jobs within the party, and now as we said, this is kind of becoming a one-party state. It means he's in the position to dole out jobs, and so on. So. And at some point, he kind of is controlling access to Lenin as well. Now, I saw in it. I won't get too much into it because I'm trying to keep a lot of the whole like religious types things, conversations about religion and stuff and cult stuff on my other channel, and I don't want this channel to be about that sort of stuff. But I did see an interview with a former Scientologist who was talking about a lot of the history within the Church of Scientology. And there's incredible parallels between the way David Miscavige was able to acquire power for himself within the Church of Scientology, and the way Joseph Stalin acquires power within the Communist Party. So there's some incredible parallels that they find themselves in a position to do this, because that they can dish out the jobs, whatever, and they at some point have the kind of one of the few people who have accesses to the leader,
The Communist Party went with it. Everybody assumed Trotsky would succeed him. He was a great speaker, he'd won the Civil War, and he had a dope-ass train. The last person anyone expected to take over was Stalin. Stalin wasn't a great intellectual like Lenin, or a charismatic war hero like Trotsky. He was, as one Menshevik described him, a gray blur. Someone who operated in the background. Someone who you might not even notice. But it was in the background that Stalin would rise to power. Here's how it happened. After the revolution, all the Bolsheviks hoped to get a cool job in the new government.
Yeah, yes, you said so. Again, if anyone thinks the whole thing like Trotsky and Stalin was in the whole powerful struggle was just about personalities or whatever. If it was a lot of clash of thinking about personalities was the key factor here, Trotsky would have won that thing hands down. Like I said, this guy, great speaker, obviously had a lot of support would have had a lot of support from the army at the time. His army, and a lot of probably, I would have said a lot of the workers, but of course a lot of the workers back in 1917 had sort of joined the Red Army or whatever, and a lot of them lost in the Civil War. So so a lot of the old workers that were able to organize the Soviets and that are not there in 1922, 23. So I mean, I think it was Bukharin made some sort of joke about says, well, we have the dictatorship of the proletariat, but we don't have the proletariat. So it was, that was like Bukharin's little joke.
What did you get? Commissar for War. Sweet. What'd you get? Secretary. Stalin was made general secretary for the Communist Party. It wasn't what he wanted, but Stalin quickly realized that even though it wasn't fancy, it was a powerful position. As secretary, he had the power to give people jobs within the party. So he would give jobs to all of his pals, who in turn would give him their support. The more pals he gave jobs, the more power he got. The more power he got, the more pals he got. Lenin may have been having wall-to-wall strokes, but he was still involved in the party, and he was taking notice. He wasn't a fan of Stalin abusing his position or insulting his wife to her face. Lenin knew he couldn't let Stalin take over, but by this stage, he was just too sick to fight it.
Yes. Now, again, true. Lenin was not a fan of Stalin. He could see what was happening. And I don't think the incident with his wife Krupskaya helped at all. And but one of the things Lenin actually, Lenin does try and get Stalin removed, even though sort of in his sort of what essentially is sometimes referred to as his will or whatever, is this last communication to the Central Committee. He urges them to remove Stalin, and alas, I don't think that message ever gets to the Central Committee. Because again, Stalin's in a position where he can control the flow of information. He's got all his cronies and his people, the people who are going to be loyal to him, into positions of power here. So you see what's coming.
Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir. Blah. Whoa. Deja vu. Lenin's last wish was to not let Stalin take over, but by the time he died, Stalin was too powerful to remove. He had his remaining opponents arrested or killed. Trotsky was banished and fled to Europe. Eventually, he would be assassinated by Soviet spies in 1940. Our dear comrade Lenin has died. We should have...
Yeah, and it's important to note that when we talk about Stalin's purges and so on, the very first purge he's going to do is he's going to purge all of the old Bolsheviks from 1917. And anyone who's looking at where the Soviet Union's going and thinking, hey, this isn't the sort of society we were fighting for. This is coming. They're going to be they're the first people he's going to get rid of. Which is obviously what leads to things like the show trials. And Trotsky, he kind of gets sidelined within the Central Committee. Eventually, I think by about 1927, 28, he leaves, and he spends sort of, the next 10, 15 years until he's actually murdered by an assassin sent by Stalin in Mexico. But he spends the next time forming this thing called the Fourth International, which is like, this grouping of like international communist parties. Now, like, you had the Third International, which was the big one, and that was the one sort of led by Stalin. And so Trotsky was essentially, forming this little international grouping, but mainly were breakaway groups. And a lot of the main sort of established communist parties that were getting there, that were very loyal to the Soviet Union, and a lot of them, quite frankly, just taking their direction from Moscow. They would denounce like the Trotskyites as being fascists and so on. And it definitely, I think, definitely set the tone for a lot of the left when it came to splits and so on throughout the next 100. Well, I mean, to be fair, that kind of happened a few times already, before the Bolshevik-Menshevik split for so on, but definitely set the tone for, I think, the sort of position the left even finds itself to, and I say the left, like the socialist left, definitely finds it to in this day.
Have a state funeral? No. Let's mummify him and put him on display so people can look at his dead body forever. That's gross. You're gross. Guards? Kill him. Lenin had waited so long to take control in Russia.
Another quick thing on this. Yes, now, I think that Lenin, as a person, I think would have been pretty horrified about the fact that his body's on public display. Now, again, one person who didn't like Stalin, of course, was Lenin's widow. Lenin's wife, Krupskaya. She even said, "Look, if you want to honor my husband, like build hospitals and schools and stuff like that. Don't build this, don't build this blooming mausoleum." But this is part of this whole thing of, this is like, you do this sort of thing with, you're doing a deification of Lenin here, and this is also the part of Stalin building his own cult of personality. And you would see, you'd sort of see him always being presented as the right-hand man of Lenin, in propaganda and so on, but he really wasn't.
But he never got to see his communist utopia. His short time in charge was spent dealing with the destroyed Russian economy, World War I, and the Civil War. He was cruel and merciless, but he really did seem to believe communism would make Russia a better place. Stalin, on the other hand, would take the Soviet Union down a different path. If you thought Lenin was a tyrant, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, girl. A secret police state, a rapidly militarizing superpower led by a paranoid man who deeply distrusted the West, would see the world come to the brink of nuclear annihilation. That's right, I'm talking about remember to click the link in the description.
Okay, so that was their oversimplified Russian Revolution. Now, obviously, that's a teaser for their that they're going to do one on the Cold War. So, yeah, in short, there we have it. That this is the start of the Russian Revolution. I mean, this is unfortunately where it ended up, and I tend to agree with that last statement. I do think Lenin definitely believed what he was doing was pushing towards this vision of a communist sort of utopia, but it very, obviously you can't excuse the way he went about it, even if he was, or deep down, maybe a bit of an idealist. You cannot condone some of the things he did. Stalin, I don't, and this would be a sort of central sort of thing of the big difference between like Trotsky and Stalin. Is Trotsky was always like had this very much internationalist kind of vision, where Stalin's sort of thing was socialism in one country, but it was more consolidation in one country, and let's build up and compete against the West. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get people on both sides of this because and I'm trying not to get political as much as possible. I'm sure I'm going to get people both on the left and the right, maybe in the comment section, who's going to tell me why I'm wrong, and okay, I hear you. Welcome to comment there. But there we go. So that was OverSimplified's Russian Revolution. Now, if you haven't checked out or subscribed to OverSimplified, please do so because they're fantastic. They're fantastic. They don't often put content out, but when they do, it's usually something very good. And it's only like one or two guys, and you think of all the research they got to go into doing this, writing the scripts, the animation and production, and so on. You got to give them a break for only putting out one or two videos a year, to be honest. So it's quite but they're quite fantastic. Please check them out. Now, I will ask you to do a favour. If you are one of the few that did somewhat enjoy what I'm doing here, please subscribe to my new channel. Please leave a comment, say hi, whatever. Please share, and thumbs up, all that stuff. Trying to get this new channel off the ground, so it's just help me out a wee bit with the old algorithms here, guys. Okay, thanks very much. I shall come back. I'll do another reaction video, or hopefully I do hope to get out and do actually get to some historical sites. It might just be filming on my camera phone or whatever for the time being, but that's kind of where I hope to be doing a bit of as well. Okay, so okay, I'll see you all later. Salute.